Good afternoon and hello, everyone. My name is Rich Longo, and I'll be your host for today's Flycast Partners presentation. Thank you for joining us today, and we're going to show you a brief overview of BMC FootPrints for higher learning, only with a twist today. Flycast is happy to have Rose Parker of the University of Tennessee as one of our hosts. Rose will talk about their experiences with BMC FootPrints V12 and take some of your questions, the audience, live. Then Flycast Partners' own Greg Gielda will talk about some of the key features within the tool that can help your organization. Now, let me give you a little bit of background on Greg. Greg's been with Flycast Partners pretty much since its founding and is a big reason why Flycast Partners remains one of the top value-added resellers in the North American IT market. Greg has a proven history in leadership, consulting, ITIL implementation, and developmental stewardship of all ITIL best practice disciplines, including change management, problem management, incident management, ITIL configuration, and release management. Greg is well into his second decade in the IT industry with several hundred implementations under his belt. Now, before we get started, Rose and Greg, let me introduce our organization. Flycast Partners is here to deliver a seriously amazing IT experience. Founded and staffed by personnel that have many years of experience in the IT space, we took the best ideas from these collective experiences and added the best components necessary to grow and become a leading value-added reseller in the North American IT market. We offer best-in-class implementation services and training in ITSM, ITAM, workload automation, and enterprise service management using ITIL best practices. Our professional services can easily scale up or down to meet the IT needs of any customer regardless of size, complexity, or budgetary restrictions. We offer implementation services both on-site and remote, as well as training to help reinforce your company's long-term IT success. Our ongoing remote administration and service offerings will enable your organization to focus on your normal day-to-day operations, saving you both precious time and money. I encourage you to visit our website at www.flycastpartners.com or simply reach out to us at 844-FLYCAST, that's 844-359-2278, and take advantage of some of the weekly webinars that we offer here at Flycast Partners. I invite you, your coworkers, and associates and peers to take a look at next month's series, our full series, and sign up for Full Without a Service Desk Creates Adhocracy, or Change Management, a Full with a Tool is Still Full. We have a whole month of April Fools next month, so please take advantage of that. I invite you to utilize some of the training that Flycast Partners offers. We do have training that is going on throughout the country, from everything from footprints to BCM, and we have some track it things. We have some services that we offer as far as remote administration. You can access industry white papers and data sheets from our website. Take a look at some ITIL best practice and ITSM tools. So please utilize our website and share some of the items on there with your coworkers, and try to learn from us. And before we get started, I want to point out that today we will be taking your questions live. I encourage you to take the time to utilize the Q&A section provided within this website today, or this WebEx, I should say, today. Type in your questions. If they're questions for Rose, go ahead and let us know, hey, this is a question for Rose. If it's a question for Greg, go ahead and let us know it's a question for Greg. And we'll try to answer as many of those as we have time for today, but we want to try to get through as many as possible. So, Rose, I want to welcome you. Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks, Rich. I'm glad to be here.
Good. We're glad you're here, too. And I want to start out now. We do have some questions I'd like to ask you about your project and how things went there at University of Tennessee. And I want you to answer them, just as openly as you can, as it will allow you to. And I'd like to, address a couple of the major pain points that your university had prior to the BMC FootPrints implementation. So what were some of the things that your organization was facing prior to the implementation of V12?
So before 12, we were on FootPrints version 11. And we asked questions of our implementation team about will FootPrints 11 run in a Linux Oracle environment? They said, sure, we set it up, and then we later learned that that wasn't the preferred environment. So almost all of our pain points with FootPrints 11 were related to Oracle database errors. So when we moved from 11 to 12, we created a totally new environment, set it up in Microsoft SQL, which is the BMC preferred platform, and that's been great because it got rid of all of those pesky Oracle errors that we had to deal with for several years.
Okay, fair enough. That's excellent. And so now let me ask you, in regards to Flycast Partners, how did Flycast Partners implementation process create a smooth transition for the University of Tennessee?
Yeah, Flycast was really fantastic to work with. We waited for a year after BMC released FootPrints 12 to try the migration. And what we found was that there were several show-stopping bugs. There were some things that we had run into that seemed unique, either to us or higher ed, I'm not really sure which, but they had not run into some of these bugs with their corporate customers. And Flycast was really great at streamlining communication between us and BMC. They submitted trouble tickets on our behalf. They got us escalated as high as we needed to go to make sure that BMC really understood some of the troubles that we had with the new footprints version 12, and they helped us make sure that we knew the exact workarounds to get around the bug or get our bugs into their development schedule so that they would be fixed in future releases.
Okay, great. And what are some of the major benefits that were realized as a result of the BMC Footprints implementation after everything was said and done?
For us, a lot of the changes were the things that we saw between Footprints 11 and Footprints 12. BMC had essentially rewritten Footprints from the ground up, and so it was a totally different product. And they had done some things that just made the administration of the project a lot better. And one of the examples of those is that Footprints organizes their containers into what they call workspaces, and I'm sure Greg is going to go into all of this. But in addition to the workspaces, they now have different record definitions within a workspace, which is kind of like a mini workspace. And you can share fields amongst your, oh, and I see Greg, he's bringing up some of those record definitions on the screen. You can share fields between your different record definitions. And so we have our incident request, our change management, our problem management, record definitions within one workspace, and so we are able to share service and classification fields across the different workspaces. And so that has really streamlined our management, because when we need to change a drop-down field, we now change it in one place instead of 3 different places in production and then 3 different places in development. And so that's been really handy.
That's awesome. And so let me ask you, besides IT, what are some of the additional projects that the University of Tennessee has already rolled out, or what are some of the plans to roll out utilizing BMC Footprints? And while Rose is answering this question, audience, I do encourage you, please type your questions in for her. This is an opportunity to ask questions of someone who's actually been through this process, who's actually brought in this tool and embraced it and spread it out throughout their organization. And who better to talk to or ask questions of than somebody who's already lived it, right? So, Rose, I'll let you go ahead and answer that. Besides IT, what are some of the additional projects that you've rolled out with this?
Sure. So our IT group has rolled out instant request change and problem, and we're currently working on CMDB. That's kind of the next piece that we're going to tackle. But outside of IT, we've used the framework that Footprints gives us to create order request systems, approval tracking systems, and trouble ticketing or request systems. And our one-stop College of Engineering, School of Music, Alumni Development, just a few departments to name, are currently using Footprints in one of those capacities. Last year, we onboarded about half a dozen new workspaces, and we're already in talks with a couple more departments so far this year. So it's been pretty well received, and seems to be meeting our needs.
All right, we like to hear that. That's awesome. Is there anything else that you would like to add, Rose, about the entire experience that you've had? And once again, audience, this is your time to type in some questions for us. Please, by all means, type in your questions, and we'll try to get those answered for you. But Rose, anything else you want to add to this? What you went through in this project?
Well, I saw that Loretta just asked a question about whether we created a service catalog or not. And
She did,
we
yes.
have a service catalog. We haven't fully integrated our service catalog. We aren't using the Footprint Service Catalog as part of. We're not using the Footprint Service Catalog with our service catalog, if that makes sense. In Footprints 11. It wasn't as evolved of a product, and we didn't even look at it when we moved to Footprints 12. So I'm not a lot of help there, but we do have a service catalog, and Rich will give you my contact information if you want to talk about that offline. We can. All right, so I see one of them is, were we able to convert our old Footprints data over to version 12? So had we moved from a Windows environment to a Windows environment, I understand that BMC has a lot of those tools available, but since we moved from a Linux environment to a Windows environment, we decided to start from scratch. We also made some changes in how we structured our workspaces, so it would not have been a one-to-one conversion. And in talking to Flycast, we decided that for us, the best solution was to not move that. But Flycast had come up with several different solutions, and we picked the best one for us.
Excellent, very good. And then I see Mr. Dugan. I would like to see what they're doing with training materials in classrooms.
Because what we have done is we've created some internal documentation. When we trained our agents, we actually recorded our training sessions and have posted all of that online. But if that doesn't cover it, ask training materials for students. So our students, we don't have them logging into Footprints to submit tickets. We are using custom web forms and the API. So there's not a lot of training for our students when they submit the tickets. They use our web form, or when they call the help desk, we just do it on their behalf. Wow, lots of questions here. Let's see. So one of the questions was about performance issues when creating and updating tickets. We're running in a virtualized environment, and so we have had to balance our VMs to maximize performance when we are publishing workspaces and publishing tickets. I haven't seen a lot of slowness when we're creating and updating tickets. We had some issues if we tried to publish workspaces during the business day. So we don't do that. We do it before hours or after hours, and then we've kind of beefed up our virtual environment so that the server can handle. I'm looking through some of the questions. There's a knowledge-based question, the public and private knowledge bases. We are using private knowledge bases within the tool. Our public-facing knowledge base is a homegrown solution that doesn't integrate with Footprints. So I can't speak to a lot of the Footprints knowledge base because we are just using it for some specific internal use cases. Oh, yes. Okay, so Mr. Donaldson, I see your question about the quick issue templates and quick descriptions and Footprints, and that's a great question. One of the things that we found was that BMC had some out-of-the-box functionality in Footprints 11 that wasn't ported over to Footprints 12, and so we had to find some workarounds on some of the things that we did. And one of those was those quick description templates that we use as canned responses, and that is what we are using the knowledge base for. So we've built out the knowledge base to let our agents search on those canned responses to send those emails back to our customers. We found that to be a great solution because we're actually able to search for what we need as opposed to looking through, 100 different list of templates. And so it's been a real benefit to us using the knowledge base in that way.
Okay. Rose, thanks for all that information, and you can continue looking at those. I'm kind of flying blind because I'm looking at my other screen here, so I won't be able to see the questions directly, but I'll probably touch on a lot of them. One of the elements that Rose talked about, in terms of utilization of footprints, which would have been continued from version 11 and into version 12, is a concept called a workspace, right? So for those of you who are not footprints users at all, workspaces are a foreign idea. But what they really represent is the collection of the stuff that you need to manage a given process. And in Rose's case, under the umbrella of a university, you have many different schools that manage many different functions and processes, oftentimes almost set up like their own little fiefdoms, right? Each with their own tools, each with their own capabilities, sometimes with their own data centers, depending on what they are. So each of those schools wants to be able to manage their tickets the way they want to, right? The School of Fine Arts wants to manage theirs their way. The School of Computer Science wants to manage theirs their way. And what Rose was alluding to is the fact that in footprints, you can use that workspace idea, and this was a continuation even from her older version in version 11. In fact, it's been there since version 1. But a workspace is the collection of all the stuff you need to manage a given request type. So, of course, all the data that you would need on a form itself is going to be collected within that workspace. So I brought my incident form up here. It looks like an incident record, captures information relevant to incidents like categories and actions and all the good stuff that we would have that goes along with it. But when I want to use it for something that's completely not incidents, right, a whole different department or a whole different area, we can make sure, for example, I'll just pick on these, guys, the facilities group has access to their own ticketing system. Facilities wouldn't be seeing IT tickets. IT would not be seeing facilities tickets like I can do in my demo environment. Each would have their own capability, so they would really see the system from their own perspective. Facilities, in fact, if they logged in, would basically look up and see their own screens, right, with their own tickets and their own view of their own data. And you can see from here, the facilities group has no access to do anything except access those facilities records. So each team or group or college, school that lives underneath that umbrella can gain access to their own work and their own capabilities. And since each workspace is free, right, you can build as many of these as you'd like. Rose is talking about the idea of more folks getting on board and more departments wanting to come in, more different schools under the hood. All of those folks would be able to have their own workspace in footprints so that they can manage their work, their requests, and manage them exactly the way they want to, with their own information in the ticket, with their own statuses and priorities, with their own notifications and escalations. And nobody else from the other schools or other departments will get to see that. So that's a key component that helps make footprints successful in those environments. It also helps make footprints successful in shared services environments or in managed service providership environments, right? Places where different customers need different looks and feels, and where one customer cannot know anything about the other customer's existence. Yet, I still need to manage all of them under one place. So instead of buying a whole bunch of separate point solutions to do that, or a separate tool for each individual customer that you would try to manage in that scenario, just like Rose wouldn't have to buy a separate tool for each school, all of it lives under the hood of footprints. Everybody gets access to their specific workspaces. I, as an admin in my case, have access to a lot of them. But this simply gives me the ability to construct those workflows, construct those notifications, construct the knowledge and the services, if I'm using a service catalog, that will accompany those capabilities and functions. So that is absolutely key. Now, I don't know if that addressed any of those questions out there, Rose. Maybe you want to pick up another question or two, and we'll see what else we can talk about and dive into in some detail.
Sure. So, Greg, one of the questions that I think you'd be great at answering is, does version 12 provide improvements for mobile devices for agents and customers over version 11?
It sure does. One of the big improvements in V12 is that, in addition to us being object-oriented now and no longer using Perl was never intended as a web-based scripting language, right? So they had built up a solution in version 11 and earlier that was displaying on the web, but the back end of the product was not really designed to do that. So it served up HTML pages, but those pages that it served up did not scale properly to fit, just about any screen size. So that had a sweet spot in terms of screen size that you could look at. And anything smaller than that, you needed a magnifying glass to see because it shrunk everything to oblivion. V12 is different. Version 12 serves the pages up in HTML5. So that means any screen size, it'll scale to nicely. It doesn't pixel anchor, to use a kind of semi-technical term about layouts, right? It doesn't anchor the pixels of the fields to a specific spot on the screen. It allows them to move based on the overall resolution of that screen and based on its size. So in that way, any mobile device can access footprints directly by displaying those pages in HTML5. And since any modern mobile device, dating back the last 5 years or so, will have an HTML5 browser on it, Footprints doesn't care what browser you use, as long as it supports that capability, and therefore you can access it much more completely. Now, there's also capabilities referred to as mobile. This existed in the old version too, and it's really intended to display pages for folks who might have very old phones. It's one way to look at it. Maybe you have an old BlackBerry that doesn't display HTML5 at all, can only display simple HTML. Maybe you browse the web using your Jitterbug. You can display your records, and I'm just going to drill into the incident workspace here. You can see V12 gives me a view of that form for agents, a view of that form for customers. This is very different from the way it used to work in the old versions of the product, where you had one form and agents and customers and your knowledge base all had to compete for that same piece of real estate. But there's also a form for mobile access. And this is a simple HTML list that allows you to just list the fields that you want to include. These are all the fields that are available. These are the ones that would be included in the list. That way, when folks need to interact with it, if they don't have a smartphone, you can still display that stuff. Now, you don't need to have a dumb smartphone. You can just go to the URL for this and display the simple HTML list on any device that you choose to. But it does give you that ability to lay this stuff out even for screens that were not capable of displaying HTML5 scalable graphics. So hopefully that'll cover that question for folks. Anything else out there that you think might be for me, Rose, or that you want to address, or maybe we could co-address?
So there's a question about workflow functionality. And then there was also a question about our departments that are using it. So let me talk a little bit about that, and then Greg, maybe you want to expand on some of that workflow functionality.
You bet.
But some of our partners use the system very similar to we would, like an incident ticket tracking system. So our one-stop does that. Our alumni group takes reporting requests. So think about the kinds of things that they might get, like donors may want information on some student data or how donor money is spent and things like that. And so they can submit report requests, and our alumni group tracks those. Our one-stop is the first point of contact for our registrar's office, our financial aid, our admissions group. So they're our student information system support team, and they use footprints very similar to the way we do as a ticketing system. If the one-stop can't handle a question about someone needing assistance registering for classes, they'll escalate it to their Tier 2 group, very similar to the way we would. Some of the ways we've used footprints outside of some of that standard functionality is in our order processing, our order request tracking. So think of it as, if you need to go buy a computer and you need to get certain approvals in order to purchase that computer, we've built out that workflow within Footprints to track those approvals before it gets sent to our business office to actually place the order and have it shipped to someone's office. So we have built that out. Our College of Engineering is also using that change approval module to track whether students have completed requirements in order to graduate. So students have to complete a couple of different experiences. They submit those online. It goes to the appropriate people within the College of Engineering to approve that and then send that information on to the next place. And so those are some of the ways that we are using workflow outside of IT to track what folks need on campus. Most of it is those requests that require approvals or folks that just need to track the types of requests that they're receiving, and then how to report out on those requests. The reporting in Footprints 12 is significantly different than the reporting in Footprints 11. You can basically pick almost any field within the system and build your report very similar to what Greg was showing a few minutes ago with the web form. You choose your field, and then you choose what you want to report on, and you just build all of your and or statements. Footprints 12 also has a preview button on your report, which, for any of y'all that are using 11, you know how you have to run your report and then you get it and you say, oh, dang, that's not what I wanted. Now there's a preview button, and that saves a significant amount of time as we're building those reports.
You bet. And
so,
Greg,
Greg, do you want to expand on that workflow functionality any?
Yeah, I sure will. Everybody can still hear me all right? So,
loud and clear.
Perfect. Workflow in Footprints can touch on literally any process, right? Because workflow is intended to move the ticket along its life cycle, kind of like a train along a track. And when the ticket moves along its life, trains stop at stations to do things. Tickets stop at stations in their life to have things done, work performed. Sometimes that work is an approval. Sometimes that work is an assignment to a different group. Sometimes that work simply changes the status to indicate, hey, we've gotten past a certain point in the life cycle of this ticket. We'll notify the customer now that we've reached that state. So workflow can manage literally anything. And Rosa had alluded to the fact that you can use it for approvals. Now, the approval engine in Footprints, the ability to make those approvals happen, to record them in the record or do it via email, is referred to as change management. It's kind of an unfortunate term because really it's an approval engine that works anywhere in any workspace in Footprints. So that means any process can have one or multiple approval steps that you have to go through, whether it's a problem management process to say, hey, we're going to evoke a permanent fix, whether it's a change request where we're making changes to our IT infrastructure, or maybe a facilities request that says, hey, you know what, we can't really shut that cooling system off. It's still too hot. Let's do the work after hours when people have left the building, and let's get it approved for work after hours. Any work of any kind that somebody or many somebodies needs to step in front of to say yes or no to can leverage that approval engine, which in Footprints, again, is labeled change management. I think it's a little more catchy term than, approval engine. I probably didn't get a lot of people who's interested. Now, if you look at it purely from a change management standpoint, of course, you can open a request for change, right? And information in the record, whether it's a request for change or an incident or facilities request, whatever the type of ticket is that needs one or more persons to either say yes or no, or that simply needs to move the ticket through a special life cycle. Hey, it's got to go down a special set of tracks because it's a passenger train, so it doesn't stop at all those other stations, right? It makes a beeline all the way to the end of the run. Whatever those workflows are, you can use what are called defining criteria. Basically, you're just telling Footprints which criteria on the ticket must be true in order for the workflow to be evoked. In this case, the criteria that has to be true is which change type are we using. I'm going to go through the various workflows that are described for change management. So when I go into behind the scenes here and show you kind of how those train tracks look, I'm going to go into my change management workspace. I'm going to go into my workflow processes. You can see I have one defined for each of those change types. The workflow process, for those of you not familiar with Footprints at all, it may be different. For those of you who are familiar with older versions, this is very different, because there was no such an animal in version 11 or earlier. Workflow is this picture. This is the instruction set that's providing Footprints with information about what to do and when. So when I create a technical change request, Footprints is going to say, great, I'll move it to pending approval. I'll wait for someone to say yes. If those someones have said yes, then it becomes approved for production. If they said no, then it's rejected. And you can see I have some R's here. I'm not attempting to be piratey. But these R's are out here because we do have places where we want to evoke a rule. So if I look at the R, you can see I have a business rule here. It's going to send a notification. I can create another business rule, do other actions at this stage if I want. Footprints understands this arrow as transition. Right? So it's transitioning from one state to the next. And it will fire that rule to do the notification on transition, so that as it moves from one status to the next, the rule fires, it notifies someone or changes the assignment or whatever it needs to do. Now, workflows are constructible in the workspaces themselves with your mouse, so there's no coding or scripting. Right? Nobody has to know how to write any language. And you can create and or modify those workflows to your heart's content. If I look at my emergency workflow here, this is an extremely linear process, right? Starts here, goes all the way to the end. Nobody approves anything. So you can certainly make workflows that look just like this. Nobody has to approve, it just lives a life. But the truth is, I want a bouncer to step in and say, nah, no emergency changes unless, somebody who can wear that is stepping up and saying, yeah, I got this in case it goes bad. So I'm going to remove this arrow that says, I don't want tickets to get assigned to anybody unless they're approved. Now you can see I can make everything an approval state, right? Any states in my life cycle of my record, I can say people have to approve here. So you can have multiple places if authorizations need to take place where different folks look at the ticket for different reasons in different statuses. I'm going to do it here at request and say this is an approval state. Added approval state, when I say that, Footprints asks me nicely if I would like to add approved and rejected. I accept. Say yes, I would. So now you can see I have an approved output. I have a rejected output. Right? Those are two possibilities. If it's approved, then I would like Footprints to assign that record. Excellent. And I might invoke a rule here that notifies the team that's going to do the work, hey, you're approved. You do have to come in on the weekend. If it's not approved, if the folks, however many there were, said no, then I'm going to reject that. Footprints is telling me, hey, you can't connect two things that are already connected. So as I dragged that across, it was just giving me a warning. Hey, don't connect two things that are already there. I've now told Footprints, if we reject the request, then it's closed. Now, this actually is just a little dotted line. I don't know if it'll show up there, but it's just showing you that the line goes all the way back to request and leads to rejected. So the outcome is either I'm good, I'm not good. If I'm good with it, it's assigned and moves through its life cycle. If I'm not good, well, I'll probably want to give somebody a notification too. Maybe I'll send an email to the requester and say, sorry, the thing you asked for did not get approved. I might notify my assignees too and say, you don't have anything to do on the weekend. And then we close the request. And of course, I can send other notifications anywhere along the line that I want. So workflow in Footprints lets us create the life cycle of the ticket, lets us tell Footprints what that ticket's going to do, where it's going to go, and lets us do it with our mouse so we don't have to program anything. That way, if you can imagine a way the ticket should flow, you can instruct Footprints on what to do, and of course, you can give it defining criteria that say, hey, if the change type says emergency, then I want you to use this workflow. If it doesn't, I want you to use a different one. So in that way, if the thing costs more than $1,000, or if it's filed by Bob, or if it needs an approval because it's a change request and it's an emergency, whatever the conditions are, you can have Footprints look for those conditions on the ticket. When they are true, it hits that workflow. And then it kind of works like a car wash, right? If you push the buttons before you get into the car wash, it gives you the hot wax. That's what you should get when you go through the assembly line or the car wash. If you don't, talk to the owner. But in Footprints, if you've specified information in the ticket, it'll take you through the right workflow. And that's how Rose is able to have those approvals or even not approvals happen in their system, because each workspace can have as many approval cycles as you would like. So I can create brand new approvals in my change request workspace or create any sort of process that I want to in any other workspaces I have. That approval engine applies to all workspaces, not just one that you might build for change management. So hopefully that'll help clarify that question. Other pieces out there that may be questions for you, Rose, or that I can help to answer.
All right, so we had a question about how does the responsibility of tasks move from one party to another? So some of that Greg just showed you with the change approvals, and not even the approvals, but you saw how he was building out those connections between the different steps in your process. And so you can build business rules to move tasks from one party to another. But one of the things that I really like about Footprints 12 is that when you are assigning tickets, you can now type ahead. So you build out your teams, you build out your agents, and if you are like me, I mean, I'm a member of 4 or 5 different teams, depending on what type of ticket I'm working. We organize all of ours by service teams. So I'm a member of a bunch of services. And you can actually type in someone's name or their team into the assignee field. So for us, the agent working the ticket assigns, if it needs to be escalated up, they will manually assign that ticket over to the appropriate team. If we ever misassign a ticket, which, I mean, rarely happens, right, then the person that receives it can simply open up the ticket, delete what's there, and then type in the correct. You can browse, just like Greg is showing you right now. You can browse to the appropriate team, but that type ahead functionality works really well, and we find that that is much more user-friendly than actually browsing for the team.
Definitely.
So anything you want to add to that, Greg?
Sure. Because Footprints V12 lets you have multiple assignee fields, whereas older versions of the product did not, right? There was one assignment location for both the team and the person. It became difficult sometimes to track where the ball was in the tube, right? Who really owns this ticket, because I see 16 people assigned to it. So in V12, you can create as many assignee fields as you'd like, which means, I'm just going to jump over here to my incident workspace where I have a couple of them that I've built. These two assignment fields, one manages the actual team that's assigned to the record. Another one manages the primary assignee for the ticket. I can create one that manages the secondary assignee and the tertiary assignee and the escalated to assignee and the manager assignee. And if I look into those assignment fields and see people in there, then I know the ticket got escalated, right? Because the escalated assignee now has a person in it. I don't have to look into a single field and say, wow, which of these people was it escalated to? There's 6 of them here. The other big win is when I'm setting up fields for managing my assignments, you can see I have Alex assigned here. I'm just going to browse for the assignee to illustrate my point. I want to assign somebody else too. I'm going to assign Rob. Now notice that Footprints is whining at me back there. Could not add assignee, it says in that little error message. Maximum number of assignees was reached. That's because I told Footprints this is the primary assignee. I named it that. But since primary assignee to me means there's nobody else, right? How many primaries do you have before it's a secondary? So there's one primary assignee. So Footprints is telling me, because I told it, don't let more than one person be primary. So it's not going to allow me to assign more than one person to this record. Now I could certainly say, yes, allow as many people as you want. If I remove Alex and put Mike on, then I'm good. Right? I have no problem at all. Footprints doesn't complain about anything. I can do it easy. But the minute I try to add somebody else to this record, Footprints is right back to saying, hey, wait a minute, you can't make that happen. So the ability to assign tickets is also more flexible than it used to be because I can maintain multiple assignees. And when you're doing tasks, one of the things that Footprints, even in earlier versions, had is the ability to create templates. These templates can reflect work that you commonly do. It can be, single file type work, like reset somebody's password as a template, which we have here. Or you can have templates that have multiple prongs, right? Multiple folks that have to be involved. So for example, if I use my new hire template, then Footprints is going to create 3 different pieces of work that have to be done as tasks. And it's going to add these to the record. Now, this beats the heck out of me trying to kick this one ticket around like a can down the road, right, from person to person. Instead, I'm just going to say, look, I've got an overall effort of bringing someone onto the organization, and I have these steps that need to be done. Now, I have 3 in my demo environment. Have as many as you want in yours, right? 3, 30, 13, 300, whatever makes sense. But in this way, Footprints will create tasks and assign them to the people who need to do the work, 1 for each. Now I can keep track of whether that work is done. I don't have to remember to assign this one ticket to different people, again, kicking that can down the road. Everybody has their work to do. Everybody gets their ticket in their queue that they can look at and work on, even if these people are in different workspaces entirely, right? Maybe facilities comes out and does an ergonomics check of the desk and make sure that they don't need any ergonomic equipment to make it comfortable for the user. So maybe you have an ergonomics ticket and it goes into the facilities workspace and they work that record. In this way, no matter how distributed the workflow is, Footprints can manage those assignments even of separate tasks. And what's going to happen here, guys, if I scroll down a little, you're going to see this is blank. There's no subtasks yet. I'm just going to save Footprints is going to add those subtasks. So when I go down here and look, you're going to see, yeah, I got 3 separate tasks to perform. I can see they're nowhere near done because they're still in the status of request. And I can return any data about these to my screen that I want to. So that means I can always check the status of the additional work to be performed without having to open each one of these tickets and look at it. Plus, I can see any other columns of information that I choose to display from there. As you can see, I can group by this field, filter, or say, you know, I want to add other information. Right? Maybe I want to know what the priority of those requests are. So I'll add that column. Now I can see what the priority of the work is too. So this allows me to check those values quickly, allows me to maintain the assignments of separate and disparate tasks, even if they cross workspace lines, right? Even if there's different groups of folks that must be involved, because sometimes we do work like new hires or other tasks in the organization that require multiple people to take steps. And I'd like to be able to keep track of all of them without having to try to do it in just a single record and kick it down the road. Other questions out there, Rose? This is working pretty well. You see what you can answer?
Well, it looks like we have some follow-up questions.
Sure.
So can we define conditional workflow? Can the workflow update primary assignee based on the rules? So it looks like those are 2 follow-up questions to that one.
And yes and yes. Of course, the conditional workflow is exactly what we were describing when we said I can have defining criteria. Right? So the workflow conditions are going to be selected. And remember, the workflow that I have built here doesn't have to be yours, right? You can take your workflow up to a certain point and say, here's another place at which we could make a decision, change values on the record, which means it would then pick up a different workflow. Mine happened to take the ticket from beginning to end, right? Open to closed. Yours don't have to. Yours could take it right up to this point and say, great, once it reaches this state, I'm going to pick up another workflow that starts with approved for production. But I'm only going to pick up that workflow if certain conditions on the ticket are true, right? Those defining criteria we talked about. So in my case, while these workflows do take you from beginning to end, yours need not. And therefore, the system can branch from partial workflow to partial workflow, going through various portions of the assembly line, right? And getting the right parts fitted, no matter what the conditions are on that ticket. So that way, I can make sure that it branches and does all the right stuff along its life cycle. What was the other piece of that, Rose?
Let's see. Can workflow update primary assignee based on rules you've predefined?
Oh, you bet.
Predefined.
So, yep. So when we're doing workflow, right? If you use workflow to create a business rule, right? So I'm in here right now. I can use the workflow, create a business rule. I can create multiple business rules, of course, right? If I want to make changes here. But you don't have to create a business rule at this juncture. I can simply say, look, if this gets to approved for production, then I'll have a business rule behind the scenes that says all things approved for production get automatically assigned to the hardware team or whatever the action needs to be. So I would simply have a rule that was already predefined back there. I would build a business rule. If it was an assignment rule, then maybe I'll do that, or auto assign, doesn't really matter. Create the rule that says assign. Tell Footprints when I want this to happen, so I can trigger it based on anything. Should it happen live on the screen? Doesn't really have to, right? But assignment rules fire on the screen automatically, so that's cool. We can do it that way. Now I can measure for the conditions and say what conditions on that ticket must be true. So if I've already set the status of the record, go down to status. If I've already set the status of that record to approved, right, or accepted, or whatever my status happens to be, then I'll say, great, I'm going to take an action and change the assignment to somebody else, whether that's a team or some other person. So I can easily either modify the assignment, add additional assignees, or whatever action I need to take using the rules engine in Footprints. And this rules engine, of course, is just taking information that gets created from the workflow. It moved into an accepted status. Now that it's there, I would like a rule to fire and change the assignee as a result of that. Perfect. Thanks, Russ. Anything else out there that we can tag team on?
So looks like there was one other question for me about whether we have one team that sets up the different workspaces and business rules, or do we have an administrator in each area? And I did want to address that. We do have a primary team of Footprints administrators in our organization. And they would serve as the senior members of our footprints team. They work with the other departments. They teach them how to administer their workspaces, and they provide essentially tier 2 support. If the workspace admins for one of the departments get stuck, they can contact us and we'll help them work through what they're dealing with, because we may have seen it before, one of the other groups may have seen it before, but what we didn't want to do was require the departments to call us if they wanted to change a drop-down that currently says yes or no, and then they want to add a maybe. So their drop-down now says yes, no, maybe. We want them to be able to do that themselves, all about teaching them to fish, right? Let them update their fields. If they run into a bug or an issue, they can give us a call and we provide support for them. We also do any correspondence between us and BMC. So if we run into something, or if one of the departments runs into a bug that we can't help them fix, we will be the go-between with BMC. So we don't let just anybody call BMC support. We do kind of rein that in. But that's how we manage the workspace administration. We do all of it for the IT organization, and then we teach workspace administrators how to do their own workspace. We have kind of a mini engagement with them. It usually takes about 8 hours. We do it in 2 days. And then there's a lot of tweaking before they go live, as you guys have probably experienced for yourself. So let's see. These are some really great questions. One of them was, does Footprints 12 can be used as a project management tool? This group currently is using master subtickets in version 11, but you know, the way version 11 implemented it, it's not very effective for them. So Greg, we're not using that.
Gotcha.
Can you talk a little bit about how master subtickets work?
I sure can, and we'll talk about them, you know, as related to projects if you want to do that. Master subtickets are a really good example because every master ticket sort of represents a little tiny mini project, right? If you have subtickets that are associated with it, the master ticket is kind of the overarching, what is this work we're trying to do, bring out a new hire, right? Or whatever the overarching work is, of which there are subcomponents, right? Other things that must be done, because the new hire doesn't just stride into the door and suddenly have their seat ready and their machine ready and their badge ready and their phone ready. All that stuff is done by people. So all the stuff being done is just the same as if I had assigned somebody a task in a project. Hey, I got work for you to do. The downside is when you do that on a project in real world cases, right, you're writing it on the equivalent of a spreadsheet, right? Whether you're doing it in a spreadsheet or whether you're doing it in Microsoft Project, it's basically a spreadsheet list of tasks, right? And if you do it in Footprints, I created a simple workspace here just to talk about it, to be able to discuss. That could be an example way that you could construct a project workspace. Now, by no means does this mean it's the way you must do it or that you have to have this data present, but it gives you ideas. It's a way to think about it. And in my case, I'm simply capturing detail about what the project could be. Hey, you know, are we doing this in the name of a particular product? Do we have a particular thing that we're uplifting as a part of this process or project that we're launching? Do I have an expected completion date for the work? Yes, it's today, because that's how all projects are, right? Are you done with it yet? The actual completion date was yesterday, because that's when they expected it to be done. And then go ahead and label the project and move the project into its statuses. Now, I didn't create any workflow behind the scenes here because I want to talk a little bit about the fact that you can move the ticket to any statuses that make sense. I created simple ones like, hey, charter, and then if it's chartered and approved, we'll kick it off, and if it's not, we'll kill it. It's done. Once it's kicked off, it either runs green, which means it's a nice normal project, or we're getting into the yellow and red zones. If it's yellow and red, I'm going to start notifying my project sponsor so they can plow the road because I've got resource constraints or whatever my issues are. So in that way, you can take your description field here, use it as your project log, right? Name it that if you want to. I kept mine labeled as project description, but you can use it as your project log and then send that log to the project sponsor the minute this thing goes red or yellow or whatever you want to do. Now they'll be aware of the fact that we've got projects that are limping along, not working the way they're supposed to, and why, right? How did we get to this red state? And of course, I've commandeered and used my address book and relabeled that project sponsor so that I can link out to somebody who might be able to sponsor the project. Now it's good old Greg that'll have to go plow the road for me because it's red, and he'll get the updates too. Plus, I've included information in mine about the actual project itself. So, oftentimes there are charter documents that people have. Feel free to attach that if you want to. I just included this as a way to illustrate that you can capture those relevant details directly in the record in Footprints, because when the project goes on for who knows how long, people start to question, well, what are we doing again? What was in scope? Why are we doing this? What's my motivation? Right? Why am I supposed to make this happen? So capturing some of that relevant data can all get us re-squared. This is why we're doing it. We said this was what was in scope. We said this is what was out of scope. I've included some simple hover over text, which you can do now in V12, right? Each field can have help that goes along with it in the form of hover text. So now my mouse over text can ask questions that Six Sigma would ask, like why this project and why now? So that I can make sure that I'm filling in the right details about the project. What are we assuming, right? What's assumed to be true for this project to work? What are the risks if we do or do not do this project? But here's where you start getting into other sub-tickets, right? Additional work. Because now I can just create project tasks or link to existing service requests that people did in the name of the project. Think about it this way. In the real world, how many things can you do without getting a ticket? Right? Can you drop your car off for repair without a ticket? No. They're going to give you one. Can you drop your laundry off without a ticket? No. They're going to give you one. Can you order cable without a ticket? No. They're going to give you one of those too. So your cable guy doesn't come out, your laundry can't be picked up. All that stuff requires some record of the work. Yet when we do projects, we list it in a spreadsheet, we call a meeting, and we say I'm 27.6% done, whatever the heck that means. So instead, let's just create the work right inside of Footprints. Create a service request, for example, so that I can now have the work for the project linked directly to the main ticket. And when I look in my project ticket, I can then quickly see whether that work is done. Now, I'm just going to link to an existing service request, just pick something up out here randomly and link it back to give you an idea. But I've just linked that task, right, to this ticket. I can, of course, just like before, add additional columns so I can see more information about it. But this beats the heck out of calling a meeting and having somebody tell me that, well, we were this % done. You can certainly do that here, right? I can put a field on there that shows percentage complete. But I don't have to call a meeting to know it. I can just look right in the record and see these tickets as related to Footprints, right here in this record, represent the work that needs to be done. And if you're doing this with master subtickets, we talked about that before, then one way you could do it is you can list all the master tickets here as work that's project tasks. Master tickets all have subtasks that go with them. So you could literally have the master tickets represent milestones in your project. So each master ticket listed here is a milestone. And when I open each master ticket, it would point to all the subtasks that need to be done for that milestone to be complete. So you can literally layer those requests and say all of these things rolled up represent a milestone. All the milestones rolled up here represent the project. And when all milestones are done, the project is done, and I can move it into warranty status or whatever status I'm going to keep it in. Projects do changes too. So of course I want to be able to create a change request if I need to modify something in the environment in the name of that project. So that's all linkable. And projects oftentimes change things. So which thing am I changing? Am I linking to a particular configuration item? Are we doing this project on Microsoft Exchange because we're upgrading it? In this way, I can keep track of the stuff we're doing the project for, who's doing it, what's been done, whether the work is complete. And I can do it all without having to kick a single ticket down the road. Instead, everybody gets their tasks, and we can track all of it. Now, we don't do Gantt charts, right? We're not a formal project tool in that regard. But it does represent a nice place to roll all of the work up that's being done in the name of the project. And since Footprints tracks time, I can know, and I'll just give you an example here, I can know how much time was spent doing what task, right? I just spent 3 hours and 23 minutes building a server. Awesome. So I can add my time And now it's keeping track of the fact that I spent that much time doing it. If I have rate and cost info that goes with it, I can know how much I spent on the resource that built the server. So I can really understand who's been contributing how much work to the project overall, because everybody who works on a ticket associated with that project can track their time. And because it's linked to the project, Footprints already knows that the time is being tracked as a part of that project record, so you can pull that data back out later. Hopefully that helped explain that question.
And Rose and Greg both, I am going to have to cut us off. We've run a little over today, and it's been great conversation. I thank both of you for an incredible presentation today. And for our audience, there's been a lot of questions from you asking if you could have the link to this presentation to show some folks in your organization later on. Please, by all means, if you do want the link to today's presentation, it is recorded. We'll send it to those of you that request it. So go ahead and email me directly at rich.longo@flycastpartners.com. That's rich.longo@flycastpartners.com, and we'll get that out to you in the next few days. And any other questions that you may have that we did not get to today, because there are so many questions in our queue, it's not possible for us to get to them all. But if you do want your question answered, by all means, go ahead and email me at either my email address at rich.longo@flycastpartners.com, or you can go ahead and call us at 844-FLYCAST. That's 844-359-2278. That's 844-359-2278. And we'll get an answer for you in the next 5 business days. I want to thank all of you for attending today and taking time out of your busy schedules. Rose and Greg, what a great show you guys put on today. I want to thank each of you. Thank you both.
Thanks, Rose. It was great working with you.
Oh, thank you. You're welcome.
Thanks, everybody, for attending.
Absolutely. Thank you all, and enjoy the rest of your week, folks. Until next time.